Today we're diving into how one man, Mahatma Gandhi, completely redefined what a revolution could be. He wasn't about armies or weapons in the fight for India's independence. Nope. He used something way more radical. A strategy of nonviolent resistance that was designed to completely pull the rug out from under the British Empire.
Really think about that for a second. How do you defeat one of the most powerful military empires in the world with nothing but your principles? It sounds kind of impossible, right? And yet, this was the exact question Gandhi set out to answer. And his solution? Well, it would literally change the course of history.
So, let's break this down. The way things were usually done involved armed struggle. You fight, you win, you seize power. Pretty straightforward. But Gandhi, he just flipped that entire script on its head. His method was all about nonviolent resistance. The goal wasn't to grab power for himself, but to make the empire's authority just meaningless, to make it morally and practically impossible for them to rule.
So, how did this whole revolution without violence thing actually work? Well, it was built on two incredibly powerful core ideas, and these were the philosophical bedrock for the entire movement. Okay, so the first pillar was satya, which means truth. Now, for Gandhi, this wasn't just about, being honest. It was this deep conviction that their cause, India's freedom, was fundamentally right and just and true. That moral certainty became the absolute foundation for everything. This wasn't just politics, it was a fight for truth with a capital T.
And the second pillar, the one everyone knows him for, is ahimsa, or nonviolence. But it is so important to get this right. This was never about being passive. Ahimsa wasn't about just refusing to fight back. It was an active, strategic, and super disciplined form of moral confrontation. Honestly, it took way more courage than picking up a weapon.
And here it is. This was Gandhi's lightbulb moment. His core insight was that the British Empire couldn't actually rule India without the cooperation of Indians themselves, right? Indians were the ones staffing the offices, going to the schools, buying the British goods. So the strategy became brilliantly simple. Just peacefully withdraw that cooperation. The whole system would just collapse under its own weight.
So, that brings us to the first massive test of this whole idea, the non-cooperation movement of 1920. This was the moment these principles went from theory to practice on a huge nationwide scale.
Gandhi laid out a really clear program that anyone could be a part of. We're talking prominent lawyers giving up their practices, students walking out of government colleges. People stopped buying foreign goods and instead embraced Swadeshi, which means Indian-made products. That hand-spun cloth, called khadi, it became this powerful symbol, not just of self-reliance, but of cutting the economic cord with Britain.
And the result? Oh, it was incredible. For the very first time, the freedom struggle wasn't just for the educated elite folks. You had peasants, workers, students, and women pouring into the streets and joining in. It totally transformed Indian nationalism into a real mass movement.
But, the movement's incredible success would lead to its biggest test, a moment that was going to force Gandhi to choose between all this momentum and his most deeply held principle.
So in February 1922, in a town called Chauri Chaura, a protest turned violent. An angry crowd clashed with police, and 22 officers were killed. And in response, Gandhi made a decision that absolutely shocked and angered a lot of his own followers. He called off the entire national movement, right then and there, just as it seemed like it was hitting its peak.
So why? Why would he do that? Because for Gandhi, how you achieve freedom was just as important as freedom itself. He said that Swaraj, or self-rule, without moral discipline was meaningless. In his mind, the movement had lost its moral footing. And self-rule won through violence? That wasn't real freedom at all. His commitment to nonviolence was absolute.
Okay, so after years of rebuilding and regrouping, Gandhi was ready for the second great test. But this time, the strategy was going to evolve. This was the civil disobedience movement.
And you can really see the strategic shift here. Non-cooperation was all about refusing to help the system. Civil disobedience, that took it a step further. It was about actively and openly defying the system by deliberately breaking laws they saw as unjust. This was a much more direct, in-your-face challenge to British authority. And this movement kicked off with one of the most iconic acts of protest in all of history, the Dandi March. Gandhi chose to protest the British monopoly and tax on salt, something every single person in India needed, even the poorest of the poor. He and his followers marched 240 miles to the sea, where he picked up a handful of salty mud and broke the law. That simple, symbolic act of defiance just lit a fire across the entire nation.
The response was just immense from both the Indian people and the British. Inspired by what Gandhi did, people all over the country started breaking the salt laws and other unjust rules. And the British reaction? Mass arrests. We're talking over 60,000 Indians, including Gandhi himself, were thrown in jail. Just think about that number.
So even though neither of these huge movements led directly to independence overnight, their impact was, well, it was profound and permanent. So what was Gandhi's lasting legacy from all this?
At the end of the day, these movements completely changed the game. They showed the world the brutal side of British rule, which really weakened its moral authority on the global stage. They turned the freedom struggle into a true people's movement that just couldn't be ignored anymore. The goal was no longer just reform, it became complete independence. And maybe most importantly, they created this powerful new blueprint for how oppressed people everywhere could fight for their freedom.
Now, the groundwork laid by these movements is what eventually led to India's independence in 1947. But they also left us with a powerful question, one that feels just as relevant today. In a world that is still so full of conflict, what can we learn from a strategy that was built on truth, on courage, and on nonviolence?